Welcome to TERRA's third Thursday video podcast for the month of September 2025. Today, we will be having another strategic discussion designed to help your organization maximize your e-scrap and ITAD operations. I am your co-host, Stephen Napoli, president of TERRA, the Electronics Reuse and Recycling Alliance. For our regular consumers of these sessions, you know that we strive to be brief and to the point while providing you with useful information that you could use in your daily operations and to positively impact your bottom line. As a reminder, all of our sessions are available on our website, jointerra.org. Quickly before we get started, I would like to acknowledge our new and returning members since our last session. Quantum Lifecycle Partners, ITAD Logic, New Green Metals, CACRC, Gem Life Cycle, and Call to Recycle. Today, I am pleased to welcome Todd Bowman, a problem solver and small business advocate at Insperity. For almost 40 years, Insperity's mission has been to help businesses succeed and communities prosper. Their more than 4,400 associates across the globe offer the most comprehensive suite of scalable HR solutions available in the marketplace. In today's session, From Compliance to Culture, HR Insights for eScrap and ITAD Companies, we will discuss the critical role HR plays in making operations efficient and successful. We will also discuss the options available to you to ensure your most valuable assets, your people, are protected. All right, welcome again, everybody, to another edition of TERRA's Third Thursday webinars. As I mentioned in the preamble here, we are here with Todd Bowman, and we're going to be talking all things HR. I'm really excited about this session today. We did a kind of a session on HR last month, so it's been kind of like our people summer. We were talking a little bit more about, if you missed it, you can always see it back on our website, jointerra.org. But we were talking about, how you transition your business as an owner to, our ESOPs and other ways to kind of use your employees as a potential buying opportunity for your business. So this is now kind of involving that just into, taking a good hard look at your people, how you're recruiting them, how are you managing them, HR systems and policies and procedures. So this is a good, how-to as it relates to HR. So I'm really excited to have an expert, a subject matter expert in this area to help us out this month, and that's Todd. So I'm going to turn it over to him to let him introduce himself and his company.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me in today. Very kind of you and very generous. So looking forward to having a chat. My name is Todd Bowman. I am a business performance advisor with Insperity, based here in our Nashville office. I've been with Insperity coming up on 10 years. Hard to believe it's flown by that fast, but my job is to really go out into the community, work with small, mid-sized companies. I consider myself more of a problem solver than an HR expert. I've got the HR experts I get to work with in my office here. So, end of the day, my job is to meet folks, figure out where they are, and see if there's a way to help them get to where they're going a little more efficiently as it relates to HR. So we talk to all kind of companies, startups, established brands, and those that are trying to exit. So every day is a little different and kind of keeps me on my toes.
Well, excellent. So we talked a little bit on the beforehand. I know, for us, a lot of our members here, our certified folks and others, are in that small to mid-sized businesses. So talk a little bit about the kind of the trends that you're seeing in the marketplace today as it relates to businesses that size.
For sure. Yeah, I'll just start with, being a business owner is a job in and of itself. Everybody has an idea, they have a product or a service they're trying to get to market. And then once you do, you obviously have to build out the support for that company. And all of a sudden you have to hire people. Now you have two jobs. Now you're a business owner and you're an employer. And rarely does anybody get into business to be an employer. Everybody says, "Hey, one day I'll get to do all these things." It just kind of shows up, right? So obviously, the bigger you get, the more complex it gets. So, at certain sizes of companies where the compliance piece kicks in, that's usually the trigger to bring in different resources and things to keep you, compliant when it comes to state and federal. And federal is federal, but state changes state to state. So, what we tend to see is a lot of folks don't know what they don't know. They're busy running a business, heads down, trying to get cash flow coming in, run operations efficiently, and then all of a sudden there's something that pops up with HR. So generally, it's kind of the back of the mind before they put something formal in place in some cases. So my job is to come in, figure out really how'd you get here, who started this thing, and where are you taking it, and where do you see your blind spots and growth opportunities, and try to back into that. So what most people are struggling with right now is really just the cost of being an employer is very expensive. One of the hot potatoes in our world, obviously, is insurances. And if anybody's
Yeah.
paying attention to health insurance, it's not getting any cheaper, and it hasn't been any time in the last 5, 10 years. So I think that's kind of the runaway train for folks that are trying to attract good people and keep good people while staying profitable. So that tends to be the biggest challenge a lot of folks have is what do I do with this? What are my options, and how can I provide the best within my budget? So that tends to be the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more beneath that once we get in the door and start talking with folks.
So a lot of times that's kind of maybe a separate function, and the analysis of benefits and HR. I mean, they kind of do go hand in hand, but they might be done by, a third party. Is that like the kind of services that are integrated into your offerings?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say our services are more comprehensive. So there's no wrong way to do HR. If you're a startup company, you probably don't need a company our size to come in and do all this heavy lifting because there's not a lot of heavy lifting to do. If you have five
Mhm.
employees, everybody wears five different hats and you're putting gas in the jet while you're trying to fly this thing. But once you get to around 40 to 50 employees, you've had some good hires, some bad hires, you've had some growing pains. The HR stuff tends to become more relevant as they're trying to grow
Right.
and scale and get beyond that. So, but in most cases, people I talk to, they typically have four, sometimes five people that are supporting the HR function of the business. Most people's heads go to one of those four or five things when you hear HR. It's either payroll, it's insurances, workers' comp, benefits of some kind, maybe a 401(k), but all those things are HR centric as far as it relates to the people side of the business. Challenge is most people don't have all four or five vendors in a room together working to help them, accomplish whatever strategic goals they have. So a company like ours or others can come in and say, hey, let's consolidate as much as we can and then help you be more efficient with the stuff you have to do as an employer.
And one of the important things to our members is that, every our folks are all certified. And what that means also, in addition to the way they handle materials, e-scrap and ITAB materials, is employee health and safety.
Mhm.
So do you help, consulting with and working with companies and making sure that, their ISOs and their other certifications that they're adhering to are kind of managed through HR?
Absolutely, absolutely. You look at the overall well-being of an employee. It's safety, it's health, it's mental, it's all the things that relate to that employee. But specifically to the safety side of the house, there's obviously best practices, things you should do, things you shouldn't do, and stuff you really need to be doing. So on our side of the house, there's a dedicated service team that supports our clients, and one of the members on that team is actually a safety specialist. So their job is to, if nothing else, do a walkthrough and make sure everything is compliant. But if there's specific safety trainings they need to do, we do help them with those types of specific things. Some of it's industry specific, most of it's pretty agnostic, but end of the day, it's more prescriptive of, hey, let's make sure we're doing this the right way so that we don't slip up and make a mistake and avoid some exposure. Because as a business owner, there's a lot of exposure and liability, not just to the compliance side, but to doing things wrong from the employment side too. So all that ties back to, proper practices, procedures. So everyone that you have employed knows expectations and kind of when we're going right, how we celebrate success, and then we're off track, how do we course correct?
Right. And, for here, it's like, the most important asset that our members have, that are their organizations have, that are doing this day to day, are their people.
Hmm.
Because if it wasn't for their people, they would just be simply brokers.
Yep.
So, to be able to have, a holistic approach in the way that they're managing their HR function and be aware of the things that are out there, the gotchas,
Yeah.
um, is very key to their long-term success.
Yeah, everybody we talk to wants to do the right thing, but it's not there's some big HR boogeyman out there. It's just kind of the nebulous unknown of what do I have to do, versus what I like to do. And that's where, working with a partner like us or others can sit down with you and say, what's important to you? And let's prioritize these things. Is it growth? Is it sustainability? Is it exiting the business? Let's set you up for a proper exit. So there's lots of ways you can approach that conversation, but at the end of the day, it's having somebody working alongside you that's is in lock and step, knows what you're trying to do, and can help you execute efficiently. And there's only like three ways you can kind of do HR. You can partner with a brand like Insperity that kind of it makes it efficient with all the tactical things you have to do buttoned up in one place. You can have all your compliance buttoned up with a company like ours, and then ideally having that dedicated service team helps you work towards a mutual plan of execution towards growth, exit, whatever that may be. Then you can also have another version, which would be, let's have the four or five vendors, kind of the brother-in-law model, I call it, where, what you start off with, I call somebody that does this, or I'll call another buddy that owns a business. Like, who do you use for that? And they kind of plug and play those things together. That's another way to do it. And then the third way is kind of something kind of in between. You've got a brand that's going to help you do most of that, but there's still a lot of risk and exposure to the company to make sure it's done right. So there's a different time and a place for everybody at the table. Sometimes the brother-in-law model works great until it gets to a certain point, and then you need something a little more consistent, especially for us, like during the pandemic, people started hiring people or people moved to other states. So if you're based here in
Right.
Tennessee and all of a sudden now you got people in 10 states, well, that changes things overnight. And you have to Google it, call your local SHRM office. There's no real go-to for that until you get the nasty gram from the state saying, hey, you didn't file this right. So,
Yeah, and a lot of our folks, they do have regional offices or second
yeah.
and third, fourth facilities in other states and other locations that, interstate commerce comes into play.
Yeah, yeah, and it shows up instantly once you get that zip code and on your books, like you're an employer in, let's say, Arizona. Like, what do I need to do over there? So, and then the further you get to the coast, obviously, the policies and stuff out the west and up the northeast get even crazier when it comes to HR. Just with the way the states manage, regulations and compliance is wildly different than it is in Tennessee or Florida or Texas. So.
Yeah, that's sometimes the folks that the hoops they have to jump through on the West Coast seem, very difficult to clear for a lot of our members. So,
Oh, I talk to people, they're like, we'll go anywhere except California. I'm like, well, why? If your top talent's over there, why not? Like, we don't want to tackle that bear. So, unfortunately, that's what some of the states, that's what happens when you get into those highly regulated states. And it either tends to be very employee friendly or employer friendly. But either way, with a company like us working with you, we're in all 50 states. We're a national brand, so the things we do are considered on a national platform. So health insurance, compliance, all that. We're kind of the easy button for those things, where a lot of people we bump into out there in the market typically are more regional or local in nature. And again, perfectly fine, but there's a time and a place for all of us. And I think the bigger you get, you need a brand that can help you execute no matter where you have employees.
so what are some of those triggers? I mean, when you get to, is it, a certain number of employees? Is it, you know, when, your healthcare costs start, spiking a
Yeah.
little bit? Kind of what's a good thing to say? All right, I need to bring some third party outside help
Yeah,
to
it's a
the
good
situation
question.
here.
I would say, regardless of where they are, it's always worth having another set of eyeballs just to check and see what you're doing. Give you a benchmark, if nothing else, to say, hey, look, am I doing the right things? Could I be doing it better? And a lot of times that's part of my conversation of, hey, there's nothing to do here. There's nothing broken. You're kind of happy where you are. There's no need that we can address right now. We'll, revisit this down the road should things change. But I would say that the triggers typically are going to be once you're in multiple states, that's when things change instantly. You no longer have the option. You have to be compliant. Just really from a tax perspective and employment laws are different state to state.
Hmm.
50 employees is kind of the magic number in our world where all the federal compliance kicks in. So now you have to do things, you have to offer benefits where under that, it's nice to have, but it's not a must have. So I'd
Right.
say between 50 and probably 100 employees is where you probably should have somebody running HR for your company. It doesn't have to be, $125,000 a year HR specialist. You could have HR generalist come in that speaks the language, that's focused more on the strategic side of things, working with leadership to execute on stuff, and then bring in a company like us or someone else to do the tactical stuff. So, but every 40 or 50 employees, there should be an equal one person on the HR side of the house. And that's with big brands. You look at like a Tractor Supply or HCA or Dollar General. If you look at their
Hmm.
HR team and kind of multiply it out by their head count, that's about where it tends to land. So, um, I'd say that's probably the tipping point for most folks. And then healthcare. I touched on that earlier. That's just a runaway train for folks. What we're seeing right now is there's a lot of anticipation of 2026 being a very expensive healthcare year, no matter how you do it. And there's 1,000 ways under the sun to build a healthcare plan now. Pharmaceutical tends to be the driver. People are doing more specialty drugs.
Hmm.
The cost to have a baby and fix a broken arm hasn't really gone off the rails that much in the last 10 years, but I think utilization has definitely changed, especially since the pandemic. So healthcare is really is more of a math problem. It's dollars in versus dollars out. So when more dollars are going out than coming in, your rates are going to go up. So
Hmm.
how do you get a hold of that and not compromise what you're offering your folks and have some consistency? That's the shell game everybody plays, usually about this time of year for people looking at January resets. So
Right.
and that's a big part of our conversation. If you look at just the cost of being an employer, that tends to be the biggest rock for most people above gross wages. If they have a good plan, there's good contribution and good participation, that tends to be the big thing that moves the needle financially from the whole employment side of where can I get more bang for my buck without watering my plan down, without going a completely different direction. And that's the biggest challenge most small businesses have, especially if you're under 100 employees. It's hard to find a lot of good options without exposing yourself from a risk perspective too much.
So, what are people looking at? I mean, can you give a round number on, what's a healthcare cost increase that people might be thinking about absorbing in 2026?
Fair, yeah. I'd say what we're seeing on average is about 10% plus utilization. That's kind of a vague answer, but the floor would be, at least 10 points and up. And again, there's a lot of things that dictate kind of where that number comes from. It could be the type of plan they're on. Not to get too much in the weeds there, but like there's fully insured plans like the one that we offer to our clients. Then there's level funded and self-funded where the companies take on more risk. So I'll say one in every 5 years, no matter what kind of healthcare plan you're on, you're going to have a bad year. It's
Yeah.
just the nature of humans using healthcare. So I would say people are anticipating, and what we're seeing coming through our desk this time of year, are probably in the low double digits, where in the past it would be the high single digit increases. So people are forced to decide, okay, do we absorb the extra cost? Do we pass it on to our employees, or do we go back to the drawing board and find a different option that's less expensive that may take out some of the features of their plan? So again, it's what's affordable, what's going to give them the best option to make them a good employer in the market. And
Hmm.
that's different for everybody we talk to. So people don't care about their carrier. They care about is my doctor and network and can I afford to go to the doctor when I need to go? So how do I as an employer get my arms around that, provide the best that's within my budget and keep my people whole? That's a big part of our conversation. But in general, the cost of being an employer is roughly around, call it 20 to 25% above gross wages. If you looked at the total fringe or burden, and that's really in three categories. It's taxes, which, we can't avoid taxes, unfortunately. Insurances, all the things you have to do to purchase, workers' compensation,
Right.
benefits, both medical,
Unemployment.
non-medical. And then that third bucket is really the more administrative tools, resources, technology to support onboarding people, managing open enrollment, or processing time, payroll, just the stuff. Um, all that on average, what we tend to see for groups kind of under 100 is around 20-25% above gross wages. If you do it with a company like ours or the other ways I mentioned before, it all kind of shakes out in the end to be about the same. So the goal in our eyes is like, can we take the same dollar and be more efficient with you and help you get a better return on the money and the investment you're making in your people already? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, just depends.
Hmm. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot, healthcare and payroll and a lot of things. What are the kind of what's the universe of services that I should expect from, HR to
Yeah.
do?
I would say there's really three legs to that stool, and the first one is to protect the company, and really in two areas. So protecting meaning, am I compliant where I need to be federally and from a state perspective? The state one is kind of wild. It depends on where they have people. As I mentioned before, some states are easy, like Tennessee, and other places out west are a little more the Wild
Hmm.
West. Making sure I'm protecting myself from things I don't know. The second one, which sounds kind of crazy, is protecting themselves from their employees. Unfortunately, we live in a very litigious society where someone feels they were wronged or
Mhm.
something didn't go the way they thought, they can sue the company. And as a business owner, you're exposed to being sued, and you will be at some point, just nature of being in business. So, doing things to best protect yourself, having consistency in your processes, most importantly, and when you hire someone new, having a formal agreement that everyone signs on both sides. Hey, when we go work together, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to celebrate victories, and here are the resources to get us back on track should there be a need to do that. So I think that's the first big bucket is making sure everybody's on the same sheet of music, no matter what side of the table you're on. The second one is all the stuff people's heads usually go to when they think of HR. It's all the day-to-day onboarding. It's processing just the information. It's benefits enrollment. It's having just all the stuff that pops up that's usually more event-driven, not a day-to-day thing, but it's just
Mhm.
noise. And it's not, you have to do it. And that's where a lot of folks, I think, get stuck in the HR space of, I don't have time to focus on that third leg of the stool, which is more the strategic side. So if you're doing HR right, the companies that we see that are outpacing their competition and really moving the needle towards a goal is they've got an HR goal and a plan and an objective. And then they back into that with having someone on their team driving those agendas with the resources and tools that they've invested in. So that's where we see people kind of moving the needle for their company more than those that are just bogged down in the busy stuff. So, how are you developing your folks? How are you career pathing your people? How are you giving them
Mhm.
opportunities to grow within the company? How are you setting up succession plans? Even if you're not exiting the business, let's say you're a small company, you've got 25 people, all of a sudden you acquire a company or you have fast growth where you once had one person running a thing, well, now they're going to be the lead of a department. They've never been a leader before. So there's lots of things that kind of show up as you grow that strategic approach can help you really have a plan when things go that direction. You got a solution and a way to address it. So um, the first two buckets I mentioned, you got to do those things. The third one is the nice to have, but the ones that do that
Mhm.
and take a real approach to that tend to be the ones that outpace and outperform their competition.
Because that's where you're investing in your people. That's where you're seeing your growth.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, like your people are your biggest asset, no matter what part of the business they work in. If
Hmm.
what they're doing doesn't align with, the goal of the company, the mission, vision, values, however you want to define that, everybody has a cost. Like, is that person producing and providing value to the company and to our customers, or are we misaligned in some way? So having I would say a specific measurable HR goal is what most people tend to be missing because they're so bogged down in the weeds, or the person doing HR in a small company is also doing four other things.
Yeah.
They don't have time to spend and the important stuff. What I tend to see is it's either the owner operator, sometimes it's kind of juggling that, or oftentimes it's the financial person, the CFO if they have one, or even a fractional person maybe stepping into that seat. Just depends on what they're able to put in there. But the bigger brands, like I mentioned, they've got a whole floor dedicated to HR
Right.
where it's cost prohibitive to do that as a small company. So a company like ours can come in and give you the same big company, horsepower and firepower at the fraction of a cost. So it's kind of that
Mhm.
build it or buy it mindset. Do I
Right.
have the resources to build this out? Kind of like you would IT. Do I want to build out an IT department or do I want to hire somebody to come in and manage that piece for me? So because most businesses are really good at one thing, which is why they're in
Hmm.
business. They're terrible at the other stuff. So you got to kind of have a little gut check, figure out, is this something I really want to absorb, or do I want to bring in a subject matter expert to help us in these areas? And again, there's no wrong way to do it. It's just whatever makes sense for your business.
Yeah. Well, I do actually have a question here that came in
Sure.
from one of our members. Kind of put that in the bucket of maybe protecting yourself from employees. There's been a lot of, question marks and not really understanding, you know, how non-competes fit into the workplace anymore. Are they legal? Are they not legal? Do they hold up? Kind of what's the
Sure.
current status of that?
So I'm going to preface this with do not take this as guidance from me because I'm not an HR expert. But I will say, yes, they are legal and they're different state to state. So that's where it gets a little slippery. So I know Tennessee, for example, is a right to work state. So Oftentimes, people in Tennessee will put one in place, people will sign it. It's really up to the company to pursue action when that person leaves. So it's more of it's an agreement that, hey, should you leave, you're not going to go work for the competition, but it doesn't mean they can't. And if they do, you have the right to go pursue them and say, hey, we agreed to this. It really depends on the jurisdiction you're in and how serious they take that agreement and the verbiage within it. But people still do use those. It's kind of like a prenup for some people if you think about it that way. It's like, well, I thought we
Hmm.
were friends. I thought we would get along here. It's different state to state. So I don't want to give guidance saying, hey, here's the hard and fast rules. It really does depend on where you are. But people still do put those in. It's up to the company to pursue litigation if the employer leaves and goes to a competitor. Um, if your top producer leaves and goes to the competition, that may be different than someone that's been here for 6 months and just wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
It's very subjective. It
It's the
depends
former
on,
versus the latter. I think that gets people worried because,
yeah,
'cause your business is your customers, right? And
it
your
is,
business is
but
your employees and your business is your customers. And if your employee walks out with the knowledge of your customers, they're walking out with a big piece of your business
yeah.
potentially.
And that's a part of also that compliance piece of, hey, let's make sure that when we have even just within your handbook, like, hey, how you manage data, how you manage security, all those are things that are very sensitive things. So that if someone agrees to not download all the client data before they leave and they do that, then those are the things you want to make sure you clearly identify in your policies of, hey, we're all going to work together and here's the expectations for everybody. And anything that you can go back to if you have to go pursue litigation, anything that's documented always helps out. Always document, document, document. Good and bad. But it starts with the handbook, expectations, onboarding, like, hey, here's the rules of engagement. Are you good with that? Or are you not good with that? And they'd have the option to hire them or not hire them, or they have the option to take the job or not take the job. So non-competes are there, but it depends on where you are and how much you want to pursue it, really.
Well, just kind of continuing on that theme for a
Yeah.
minute. What do you see out there that are kind of just a couple of the gotchas that people sometimes just neglect because they don't have maybe as comprehensive as an HR plan as they should?
Yeah, oftentimes it's more, I would say, operational type things of HR. What we tend to hear when people are kind of frustrated with what's going on is something's broken between one of the systems they're using. Either they don't talk together or they thought something happened and it didn't, or whatever it may be. So that's a big piece of frustration folks come to us with is, hey, I thought this person was enrolled in our benefits. They went to the doctor. It turns out they weren't even in the network. And yeah, I've had business owners that are writing the check for insurance say that they took their kids to the doctor and they weren't even let registered in the plan, stuff like that. So I think just there's so many different ways to look at it, but I would say understanding kind of like just having a consistent process and having someone that has oversight and more importantly understands, how it's supposed to work. Um,
Hmm.
that in and of itself is a very, time-consuming part of HR, which takes you away from the strategic side. So it's typically when things kind of pop up and break. On the employee side, you're going to have good hires, you're going to have bad hires. That just shows up when it shows up. So I think the simple way to look at that one is to go back to what did we all agree to when we first got engaged here? And are we tracking in the right direction? One thing that does come up oftentimes are performance reviews. And I think some people see that as a negative or a positive. The negative is usually like, yeah, we do it once a year. We check the box. It's very subjective. Like, yeah, Todd showed up on time. He did a pretty good job for us. We'll keep him around
Hmm.
versus having more consistent check-ins, either quarterly, like, hey, how we tracking? It's been 90 days. How we tracking on this? And that way, at the end of the year, everybody's on the same page with, hey, what were our results? What's the scoreboard look like? Did we accomplish the goal? And if we didn't, it shouldn't be a surprise. It should be something you're working towards. So I think a lot of times where we see people falling short in that area is the employee may think, hey, I'm crushing it. I'm doing this job and they should love me and they get the review and it's not stellar. That could go one of two ways. So I think
Yeah.
the big thing is communicating up front expectations, but then all along the way, not micromanaging, but I think like any relationship, personal, professional, communication is critical and honest feedback is critical. So have a system that allows people to measure themselves against their expectations and vice versa. And that way, when there's opportunity to grow, I had a client not too long ago said there was a guy in the warehouse that raised his hand. Hey, I'd love to do these things, which were totally unrelated to his job. And she said, "That's I never would never thought of you in that role, but if you're interested, let's get you some assets to learn and develop." Guy shifted directions. Now he's one of the leads within the company in a totally different department. He was a forklift guy, you
Hmm.
know. So I think just having communication, having a way to measure what's measurable, and being honest about it, it gets people in and up within the company, and it gets people out a lot faster too that just aren't in the right seat. Or if they need to be in a different seat, like I just mentioned, you can adjust that and still keep a good employee.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, if you're in a weight loss program and you didn't weigh yourself, you would have no idea if you were making any progress. So you got to do this.
Exactly.
If you don't, what you don't measure, you don't understand. So,
Yeah.
that's sage advice to make sure that that's going on an ongoing basis.
It's a good analogy. I mean, you don't gain weight overnight and you certainly don't lose it overnight. But I think if you're consciously working towards something collectively, you've got a much better chance of hitting it. And, making sure that what you're doing aligns with the whole company's direction as well, not just you're rogue on an island doing your thing, hoping I'm doing a good job. Sometimes you get a little bit of scope creep of, hey, I was hired for this job. I'm now spending more time over here. Identifying that sooner than later, that's always key too. So it all goes back to communication, just consistent, open. I know in our office we have a weekly standing 30-minute one-on-one with our leadership team.
Hmm.
Check in, where are we short, where are we growing, what do we need to fix, and let's consistently like be working towards the same thing. And even that changes things. It sets expectations for everybody. So you come in prepared to have a good conversation, or if you're not on track, a different conversation. So.
Right. All right. So let's go. Let's continue here. One other bucket of conversation area we want to talk about was, what HR should do, in terms of cost cutting, compliance,
Yeah.
revenues. Let's start talking about that a little bit.
Sure. So I would say, as far as the cost goes around like I mentioned before, it kind of lands in the same area. So it's the taxes, it's payroll taxes, things the employer is responsible for. That's roughly 8% or so of someone's salary. And the other bucket is more the insurances and the resources you have to work with different partnerships. That's going to vary from the knees to the neck, depending on what level of services you're getting. So no matter how you do that, I think trying to get the most bang for your buck again in the things you're able to afford to do, and then most importantly, tying it back to an outcome. So is our priority this year to fix our benefits and get back where we were 3 years ago, and we need to invest in that to fix that? Then let's focus on that this year. Is it let's put a development plan in for our folks. Let's go find some resources to help scale the business and give people the skill set and the resources they need to grow within the company. There's always that joke like, well, what if we train them and they leave? It's like, well, what if you don't train them and they stay?
Hey.
So, but that's a real thing. I mean, I think any good leaders wants their people to thrive and have the best possible results for themselves and for the company equally. Again, that's there's varying degrees of what that would cost. Somebody asked the other day what the average cost is for development tools and resources. The average nationally is around $1,200 a year for a good development program. Now that's going to depend on a lot of things. Is it online? Is it in person? Is it a one-off thing? Is it consistent? Variable things in there, but the median would seem to be around $1,200 or $100 a head a month would get you a lot of good resources to help your people grow and scale. And it can go obviously above or below that, but I look at it as you're investing in your people. Do they feel welcome? Do they feel loved on? Do they feel appreciated? Do they feel like they're making a difference, or is it just a paycheck? And when it's just a paycheck, you see that real quick. It's ugly, and people
Yeah.
do just enough not to get fired. So a lot of our conversation, I know within internally, but then also with our clients is culture. That's a hot potato. People say we want a good culture. You have a culture. It's either by definition or by default, but you have one. And like a personal relationship, the culture in your household mirrors, the parents. Just like in a company, the culture in a company tends to mirror the leadership style and how they run the business. So. sometimes people say they want one thing and they're doing the exact opposite and aren't willing to invest or change. And sometimes they're trying to find anything they can to get everybody on the same sheet. So I think culture is a big piece too of what do you want that to look like? What are you doing specifically to define that? And what feedback are you getting from your people? It's not just a pizza party when things go great. People hate that. Like, give me something tactical that I can run with.
Yeah. People are motivated all day long. They're
Yeah.
motivated to work hard, or they're motivated to sit there and do nothing. That's
Yeah.
motivation. So, yeah, you've got to be investing in people to have them invest back in you.
And I think generationally, that's different for everybody. You've got 4 or 5 generations in the workforce right now with very different expectations. You've got folks
That's
my
so
age and
true.
a little bit older that are on the back end of their career, and you've got folks that are just coming into the workforce who have very different expectations. So, again, during the pandemic, a lot of what we saw was it wasn't as much about the salary or the benefits. It was what's my, life balance, my time balance look like? Like, how much time can I spend doing these things versus stuff for you while still getting the
Hmm.
same pay? So that ripped the Band-Aid off a lot of stuff from what has historically been, hey, here's your benefits, take it and be happy to, yeah, I think I'd like to spend more time with my kid's baseball game or more time, less time commuting. Um,
Hmm.
and that changed the conversation. So, what we see right now is a lot of people are getting back into the offices that where that makes sense. If you're manufacturing something, you really can't do that from home. Obviously, you can't remote in and work something. But there's got to be a balance, and I think it's being intentional. Hey, what makes sense for our business? Is it a hybrid of some kind where we come in 3 days a week? Personally, I'm in every day because I come to work and I go home to be home, and I think there
Right.
needs to be a delineation. 'Cause I know personally during the pandemic, there was no off switch. I'd work in the dining room table, I'd do things whenever, and it kind of popped up. There was just no real sense of the day. I think just human nature, there's got to be, compartments for those things. So some people we see that are they're trying to struggle to figure that out are still struggling with continuity, teamwork, culture has shifted. If you don't know your coworker, you don't know anything about them or what we're doing together, it's hard to manufacture that. So I think just as human beings, we want to be together, we want to be face to face and know the person in the trenches next to you. Um, I think there's more value in that than anything else, just having people together.
So one thing, that's kind of consistent, I think, across our membership base is that our owners are entrepreneurial. They started these businesses. They started them as small businesses. They wear a lot of hats, obviously, but they're typically a lot of the cases they're kind of like their number one salesperson.
Hmm.
So the HR function is a bit outsourced to somebody or some group. But what are the
Sure.
things that they need to be looking at in terms of on an ongoing basis, just to make sure, you know, everything's being done above board, that
Yeah.
things are being handled properly, that there's not being leakage out the back door that they can't see. What are some of the things that they should see from their HR team to make sure
Sure.
that things are running well?
It's a good question. I would say the bigger question there would be if you're the owner operator and the business's success is dependent solely on you being there, you need to step back. You need to put in people that can run the business for you so you're working on it, not in it, which is not a bad thing because to your point, they're typically the most passionate, most effective salesperson they've ever had in that company because it's their baby, right?
Hmm.
I've got a friend of mine that does business valuation and helps people, buy and sell companies. And he had a guy that was that very much that way. It was dependent on him to show up and be there and do all the things. And he realized a year or two out that he needed to fire himself, basically. Still run the company, but bring in president, whatever the levels were, to run the
Right.
brand so that when he went to sell it, he was selling a product and a machine that was already running without him having to be there. I mentioned to you when we talked a little while back that I was down at the iStigma conference in Orlando a few years ago, and that was very much the case. There was a lot of people that you could tell were family businesses, owner, operator, husband, wife, maybe a son coming along behind them, and you know it was a lifestyle. That was their business, and then there was no real exit in mind of like, well, I'll just run it till I'm done or give it to Junior, and
Hmm.
again, the more specific you can be on that exit plan is critical. So an owner like that, Still going to be involved, but I would say the key for them is find people they can get into those seats that can manage the finances to see top line revenue versus bottom line revenue and catch any leakage going out that would otherwise be missed. Because most entrepreneurs, let's be honest, they're kind of wild, shoot from the hip, risk averse, and in my experience, typically aren't the best with numbers. Having run three companies myself years ago, I can speak honestly, like I was terrible at the numbers, but I had a great time building the company. So
Yeah.
having the right
I mean,
people in
somebody's
the
got to watch the
seats.
pennies, you know. I mean, the owners
Yeah,
kind of watch the dollars, and your accountants and your HR people got to watch
yeah,
watch the small change.
yeah. Just having, I think having the right team on the field will help you do that. And if it's an outsourced partner that you trust, or if it's somebody on your actual leadership team, those are the ones that they can spend more time in where their strength is, which could be the top sales guy or it could be the visionary for the company. So recognizing that sooner than later. And I think having a defined exit plan, because you're going to exit business one day or another. Something's
Yep.
going to happen to force you out, or you can work towards a plan to do that. So it's a matter of, hey, what am I working towards? And when something changes, do I have the right team into place? So if I need to step back for 6 months, the business doesn't fall flat. So, and that's the thing. It's stressful for business owners. If you have, 50 employees, you've got to make 51 mortgages that month. That's pretty stressful.
Yep.
So if you're not there to make that happen, you're jeopardizing not only the business but the livelihood of those that work for you. So being mindful of, hey, I'm working in 3 years. I want to have a deadline to do this, and then bringing in the right people to execute on that as you're able to. I think is where most people have success, and they're more profitable when those days come. Or if they get an offer tomorrow, they can't refuse. Being set up for that. Sometimes I talked to a guy the other day, and he said he's got a 5-year plan. I said, well, why 5 years? Could you sell your business tomorrow? He said, well, no. I'm like, well, then you don't have a 5-year plan. If you got an offer tomorrow, you should be able to turn that thing around and go, yes, I'll take it. So,
That's sage advice. And funny, I was talking with one of our members last week, and he meant that the comment about 51 mortgages that month.
yeah.
That was exactly the comment that he made. And he was like, just I look. He's like, I don't look at the books until like the 15th of the month because I know it's all in
Exactly.
the red until we get paid at the end of the month and everything gets flips the script. So
Yeah, it's
and
stressful.
it's real stressful for these owners because they are carrying uh, a lot of baggage and they care about their people and they want to make sure they're doing right by them and
Yeah,
they don't know what they don't know and if if they don't have the right help around them, they can easily get swallowed up pretty fast. And I
yeah,
know, and I hate to see that for any of the folks that are our members or in this industry that are they're working really hard to protect us, provide reuse and recycling resources for electronics. It's a very important industry, and
mhm.
all the help that they can get to be more efficient, more effective, is going to be a betterment to themselves, their employees, and our society. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, they're typically on an island when it comes to those things. So just like to your point, surrounding yourself with the people that can do it, it's critical to really, really hit where they're trying to go.
So what are the couple things that you want to leave our members with in terms of, HR, its importance, what they need to be doing, what could they,
Yeah.
where they could take advantage potentially of, being more on top of this particular area of their business?
I would say step back from it just a little bit and look at the dollars and time they're spending in certain places, and are they doing it the way that they would like to? And if they're not, you know, try to find the gaps in those things. If they don't know where they are, call in somebody that can at least give them, a different set of eyeballs. Someone like myself or others in the same business that just take a different look at it. 'Cause sometimes you're so close to something, it's just you kind of do what you do because we've always done, kind of thing. And just having a second set of eyeballs on it, saying, "Hey, have you thought about this? What are you doing towards that?" It's this is small stuff. It's not some wild swing one direction or the other. So I would say, especially as you're heading into a new year, budgets and planning are coming up. I would sit down with your leadership team unless you're not the leader, and say, hey, what do we want to see? If we pop up 12 months from now, the end of 2026, from a people perspective, like what are we really working towards? And do we have the right tools and resources to get us there? And if not, what are our options? Because oftentimes they're so focused on other things that people drive all the different things they're working towards, but they don't think about that through that lens sometimes from an HR perspective. So I would suggest that anyone that's planning and budgeting, th- think of HR in a way of like, how are we measuring this? Why are we measuring these things? And what do we want to see 12 months from now? We pop our head up and look back and it's September 26th. Like, are we where we want to be? And if not, what can we adjust to get there? So, like any other part of the business, you're looking at financials, you're looking at operations, especially in your space. There's a lot of stuff that a variety of things that touch transportation. There's tariff stuff. There's all kinds of stuff just flying at you. Just take a breath, step back from it, and go, okay, where do we need to be in 12 months from now for this to make sense? Are we getting the best value with our partners we're working with to help us execute on things that are most important to us, or are we just kind of doing the day to day as it pops up?
Yeah. Well, very good. Again, Todd, really appreciate it. Really appreciate Insperity. They're one of our newest allied members. So for all of our folks, as you know, you can request from TERRA a membership directory at any time. So when you get the next version of it, it will have Todd's contact information in it. If before that you just want to find out how to get in touch with him, okay, contact me. We'll provide you with his details. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this most important subject, which is people and HR. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody again the third Thursday of next month. But
You
until
bet.
then, take care, everybody. Again, thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it today.
Bye, everybody.